Hi, everyone. My name is Tabitha Tamori. I'm a management information systems major in the business school, and the title of my thesis is One Step Forward, Two Steps Back: How Artificial Intelligence Reinforces Barriers for Historically Marginalized Communities. The reasons that I wanted to focus on AI and historically marginalized communities in terms of my thesis is because those two topics are very near and dear to my heart. I, as a Native Hawaiian, come from a marginalized community, and I definitely understand what it means to come and have that type of perspective, and especially going and having the opportunity to go to college at Santa Clara University, looking at how in Silicon Valley, especially how technology is impacting these communities and what those effects are is very important to me, more especially because I am kind of going into the AI/cybersecurity sector in terms of my career. So that's kind of what gave me the inspiration to, look at this as my honor senior thesis topic. And I, had a great time looking at all of the information and kind of seeing what it had to offer. So the aim of my thesis was to discuss the implications of AI on pre-existing societal structures and barriers. So, not necessarily saying that or looking at how AI is inherently harmful, but more so looking at how its capabilities build upon things that are already pre-existing in our society. For example, like these structures and barriers that kind of help to explain like why AI in general has a lack of representation and misrepresentation of these communities. So throughout the thesis, I wanted to, and I did explore the ways in which AI builds upon these socioeconomic disparities and lack of access and inclusion in the workforce and also just the business world in general, in order to highlight potential repercussions that arise from integrating AI into these spaces. So, in terms of my focuses and methods, kind of going into it, something that was really important to me was helping the reader build an understanding, and also just for myself as well, building an understanding between the difference that exists between an underrepresented group versus a historically marginalized community, and that topic in general, and how those lead to, societal barriers and other structures was a big part of my thesis and kind of setting that foundation. I also wanted to look at, just those structures prior to AI completely and in general, because AI on its own obviously is very powerful, but there's also a lot to learn aside from it as well. All of my data primarily came from sources that were published within the past decade for, the most accuracy. Obviously, this ranged from, online articles, scholarly articles, journals, studies, research, basically a multitude of different types of sources in order to kind of get the most holistic and well-rounded view of the topic in general. And initially, as a Native Hawaiian myself, something that I really wanted to look at was how AI impacts Native Hawaiians specifically, because that, is a topic that I, hold near and dear to my heart. However, unfortunately, due to the lack of research specifically on Native Hawaiians in general, but more especially in terms of I led to a more general and more broad focus in terms of historically marginalized communities as a whole. So, through my research, as you can see here, I felt that my poster for my thesis encapsulated everything the best in terms of, summarizing my thesis and kind of talking about it. So, in the images that you'll see here, the one on the left kind of describes how Americans with lower incomes adopt technology at a lower rate. And in my thesis, I go into how obviously historically marginalized communities and the individuals coming from those communities, don't have necessarily equal opportunities in terms of jobs, in terms of education. And that also leads as well to lower incomes and thus lower levels of technology adoption. So that kind of set the foundation for, talking about these pre-existing societal structures and how those build upon pre-existing structures and barriers, and then thus how AI kind of plays into that. Next, the next photo kind of looks at how AI is created using a feedback loop. So basically, this study from Berkeley kind of looks at how AI is being trained by humans to work for humans. So, depending on the bias that those humans hold that are actually creating the algorithms to fuel AI, there's obviously bias that is thus imposed upon the people that are using it and the people interacting with it. So, if people from historically marginalized communities aren't necessarily playing a large role in developing these algorithms because they are either misrepresented or there's a lack of representation, then these algorithms and AI technologies will continue to hurt these communities until something changes there. And then lastly, the last image here talks about how half of all gateway or target jobs could eventually become automated. So oftentimes, people that are coming from these communities don't necessarily have a lot of representation in terms of highly skilled jobs, high quality jobs, which in a multitude of the articles I took a look at, it always says and talks about how AI is able to help those in highly skilled work and highly skilled positions. And unfortunately, for these communities, that is kind of not where they have the majority of representation. So it looks at how even for the exception, let's say that an individual from this community or any given community is able to really excel, it shows that AI in general is just developing at such a rapid rate and has the ability to automate a lot of jobs that puts those historically marginalized communities at even more of a disadvantage in terms of them kind of, stepping out of that those structures or kind of overcoming those structures and barriers that are imposed upon them and then further enforced as a result of AI being implemented. So I had a bunch of different results come from my sources, but overall I felt like those images and kind of what their themes were really kind of brought everything together in terms of my main takeaways. So when these structures are imposed on these groups, the integration of AI does happen to have consequences that are thus imposed on these groups. And at the end of my thesis, I kind of talk more about how in general, more research needs to be done on this intersection and also specifically for individual marginalized communities, because generally, sure, we can say that, it's harmful or it has negative consequences as it builds upon the structures, but we're not exactly sure, just in general, how they're impacting. Community to community and how that differs over time and how that has progressed and how it continues to change. So, that is a little summary and little snippet of what my thesis is about. And thank you very much.